Welcome back to the Pro Sports Podcasters on YouTube. My name's Cobe. You guys know me as Cobe from the podcast, and today I want to talk a little bit more about my boom or bust strategy in Sorare NBA and why it's been working and why some people are just coming around to understanding why it's probably the best strategy you can employ both on a budget and just from week to week in general to win at Sorare NBA. And I'm going to highlight two players that I picked from the very beginning. They were part of my initial 11-man roster I assembled for the Limited Contender Series, and why they've been basically performing to exactly the specifications I prefer, and why they're a key component to me winning every single week. Let's get into it. So first of all, before I get into the two players I've selected to highlight off my particular roster that fully illustrate my boom or bust theory, I want to go into something that's missed by quite a lot of you when it comes to selecting players for this particular purpose, is you have a tendency to look at a player's boom potential but forget about the bust. And it's just as important. Okay, it's just as important because you got to remember the point cost of each particular player isn't stagnant. It moves, it changes with their performance. They factor in the last 10 games and they give you the average there. So if you've got a player who's been booming continuously, eventually their point cost is going to be so high, they become relatively unplayable. And to illustrate that simply is to say, let's say you got a player who works themselves up to a cost of 40 points. And occasionally, they hit 50, but quite often they hit somewhere between 38 and say 44. What are you getting from that player? Even on its boom time, right? Even when it goes off, you're getting a 10-point bump, which is not bad, but it's not great either. Okay, so those are the kind of players that, although they look attractive on paper because you keep seeing them pop in the leaderboards and people have them on their winning rosters, you're like, oh man, this guy went off. You got to remember how much they cost to put in your roster to begin with, and if they're not giving you a significant bump, there really is nothing valuable there. But a player like that who occasionally puts up a 10-point game, an 11-point game, that'll drive their point values down. And if you can get a player that occasionally hits 50 but has a point value somewhere around 30, now that's worth playing, right? That is the player worth playing. But you're only going to get that if they have those bust games to keep them that low. So the bust is just as important as the boom, and that's something that's been missed. So I'm going to get into my first player. And again, both of these players were on my initial roster. I chose them specifically for this reason. I had consulted a number of NBA analysts, and they said, these are the guys that you're looking for, because I gave them my criteria. I want someone who can pop, but who isn't consistent, who shits the bed on occasion. And they were like, no problem, we've got some guys for you. And the first of which is actually on my hometown team, the Toronto Raptors. It's Gary Trent Jr. And Gary Trent Jr. currently, as of the filming of this video, has a 25-point value. Okay, so he costs 25 points to put in your roster. But he's got two games that are significantly lower. So he's got two games of a 10-point game and an 11-point game. So he shit the bed those games, and that's absolutely fine. To be entirely honest with you, when I have a active roster and I get the point totals back and one of my players shit the bed, I'm not disappointed at all. I'm actually thrilled about it because it tells me in a week or two, the likelihood of their point value cost going down is high. And that makes them that much more attractive when they do boom. And in this case, you've got two games of 32 and 51. 51-point game out of Gary Trent Jr., and he is a 25-point cost. So he literally doubled himself. That's phenomenal, right? That's what you're after. Those are the kind of point booms that you want and that you are required to have if you want to win week in, week out. This is the kind of pop you require. Now, sure, he's going to have those games where he shits the bed, and maybe in those weeks, I don't win. But I don't care. I just want the opportunity to have a possibility of winning every single week, and that's what boom or bust players do for you. And then when you look at the mid tiers with him, you've got three games that I would say low mid, so they're just below his 25-point value. You've got a 23, 24, and 24. And then you've got 2 games that are high mid, and they're both 29s. So in the 23, 24, 24, he's basically giving you what he's supposed to give you. You kind of break even there, which isn't terrible, because if you have somebody else on your roster that booms, you still have a chance of winning. And then he's got a couple of games where he actually exceeded his mid-tier, but not by much, right? He got you an additional 4 points. I'll take it. But those particular games are what keeps the average where it's at. As long as you don't have too many of those games and you have a number of boom games and a number of bust games, you're okay. But if you have a string of games that are within plus or minus, say, 3 points of that player's point cost, they're worthless to you, right? They're worthless. If you've got a player who costs 25 points and the most they get you is 29 and the least they get you is 21, I mean, they're a safe play, but they're not going to help you win. It just doesn't help you win. You're better off, they occasionally put up squat, and then other days max out, like in this case, with 51. So that's what you're after. So Gary Trent Jr. has been money for me. I don't play him every single week. Sometimes I bench him because, the Raptors only have 1 game in that game week, or there's a certain situation on the team that tells me he's probably not going to get that many minutes. But I don't care. He's always available to me, and if I have a question about who I should start, he's worth rolling the dice on. So Gary Trent. And then the other player that's perfect when it comes to this, absolutely perfect, is Jarrett Allen. And Jarrett Allen, if you watch my videos, you know I kind of got him by fluke. I had a number of players I was targeting. They were all within the same point value. And I ended up with Jarrett Allen. He was on my list of the potential targets. I got him cheapest, so he's the one I purchased. But he's been absolutely perfect in this format. So Jarrett Allen, currently, as of the shooting of this video, has a 31 point cost. Okay, his average is 31. But on the low end, he's posted 3 very low numbers. So he's posted a 12, another 12, and a 21. Now 21's not super low, but it's still 10 points below his current average. So that's significant, right? That counts. That will drive down the average. But those are seriously shit scores in comparison to what he's supposed to give you. And I'm totally cool with that, right? That's a bonus. And then when you look at the high end, he's given me 2 very highs. He's given me a 46, so 15 points over his total, and a 48, right? So these are good boom times. That's a good boom number for a player that costs you roughly 30 points to play, right? That's excellent. So he's got 2 booms, 3 busts, and in the middle, we've got 3 that are right in around his 31 points. He's got a 30, a 31, and a 35. Okay, so giving you exactly what you're supposed to get. And again, like I said, it's not a bad thing. If someone else goes off, that helps you. But what I really love here is the fact that he's got very low to very high. That's huge, right? He has that massive spectrum. And when he has a dud game, it's a dud game. Like it's a true dud. And that helps keep his point value down. Now, he's also got a couple of did not plays within the last 10 games because of this mild injury to his hip. He'd fallen on his hip. And that will happen. There was one did not play in the 10 games of Gary Trent Jr. as well. That doesn't factor into your overall, value of what they're going to cost you. They don't factor that in. But what I'm looking at here is the fact that whenever I start Gary Trent Jr., and whenever I start Jarrett Allen, there's a possibility of a boom game. There's that possibility. And my whole roster is full of these guys, right? It's stacked full of boom or bust players. So when I get that perfect storm of them going off together, I end up with a pretty decent price. That's just how it works, right? I'll have those weeks where they all bust. But I'm not disappointed. I'm not, because it means, okay, I'm still going to be able to play them. I'm going to be able to play them. I have players that started off maybe a little bit like that, or I had hoped would be boom or bust players that aren't boom or bust players, and I'm listing them for sale right now. They're just not going to help you. They're no help whatsoever. You also get players who maybe went from one situation to a worse situation. Now, when that happens, you need to be patient. Okay, you need to be very patient. I actually purchased players that I knew were in those kind of situations where they had a significantly higher value than they were worth, knowing that eventually they're going to post so many poor games in comparison, it would drive their point value down and then give me the possibility of having a boom game if they find themselves back in a similar situation. So I bought Robert Covington, Emmanuel Quickley, Daniel House Jr. These were guys I purchased knowing I wasn't going to play them right away, but if I waited a bit, they would show some value. So look at it that way too. If you see a situation arising that will give you that boom or bust potential, don't give up on that player. Just wait it out. Have a little bit of patience. And don't forget, the more you play these guys, and this is the beauty of it, I play them often, the more you're driving their experience up. So the more their bonus points factor in. And that bonus points inflates their boom or bust potential. Because those bonus points get factored in after they've produced whatever points they've produced. So when you got a boom player and they go off and you got an additional, let's say 8% bonus on top of that, you have a significant possibility of a huge score. So that's the way you got to play it. Stop listening to these other guys that are saying, oh, you got to get this guy this week. You got to get this guy this week. Go get this guy this week. This guy's been killing it, so you got to have this guy in your roster. Don't listen to them. They're talking out their asses. They're not thinking about the algorithm. They're not thinking about real strategy when it comes to Sorare NBA. They're thinking DFS, and that's fine. DFS plays a role, but the long-term strategy is completely different. Sorare NBA is its own animal. You got to treat it as such. I'm going to help you get there. Till next time.